Hello, and thank you for joining us on Reinventing Mental Health, where we are discussing alternative means for treating mental health and finding root causes. Today, we have with us our friend Justin Allman, who is a military veteran, an investor, a writer, and a public speaker. And I had the privilege of meeting Justin recently on the Ultimate Speaker competition that happened in Austin, Texas. And he was definitely a fan favorite. He has a great personality and a lot of love to share with the world. He loves to transform his ideas into creation, constantly tapping into his higher mind to explore new dimensions of thought and reprogramming old beliefs. So we want to welcome Justin to the show. Hi, Justin. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's good to be here. It's good to see you again. I haven't seen you since the event, so.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to see you, and I'm happy to hear the typical Justin personality and energy.
Yeah. I know.
So one of the reasons that you and I ended up getting to talk to each other is because as part of that speaker competition, you shared quite a long mental health journey with everyone. And you and I had the ability to sit down and talk a little bit about it. But certainly you were not always the joyful, happy, very energetic man that we get to see today. So can you walk us through a little bit of your journey?
I was actually always very happy and energetic. Even when I was depressed and I was claiming to everybody that I was dealing with depression, everybody kind of had that, no way, like you're always smiling, you're always happy,
Yep.
So I always had kind of the glass is half full kind of attitude, but that still didn't mean that I didn't have demons and I was going through certain things. And my journey as to where my mental health issues, problems, challenges, however you want to label them, began is really hard to find a starting point, because I would probably say in my early teens is kind of when I started dealing with like thoughts of inadequacy, insecurities, depression. I was an active skateboarder, BMX rider, very social with my friends. Probably about the time I was 16, I was struggling with school, going through a very complex domestic violence situation in my household with my older brother, my father, my mother. So it went on for several years, and I developed a really bad drinking problem. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm coming up on my 9 years of sobriety. I think it's been long enough. I'm forgetting. It's like the 23rd of this month. I've got.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. But I during that time, I was in and out of depression, using alcohol as a coping mechanism, going through a very complex situation with my older brother and my mother, as we talked a little bit, backstage, kind of like the layers of everything and like where it began, which section, I should focus on or talk about. So I would just ask you that, like, what was it so much about my story or things that I expressed to you that you would really like me to dive deeper into?
So everybody's journey is so unique as far as where it begins, but yours did have so many layers. You had talked about, all of the abuse that was going on at home with your brother, and then your military journey, and you came back from boot camp, and you and your brother had an altercation. You had talked about some things with your mother, some things with your father. So you can dive into whatever part really stands out to you, and you can dive into all the parts. If that's what you want to do. We don't have a time limit. So
well, let's see. What would I like to? I think I would like to really express kind of like that chapter, that period of my life when I was crying out for help. I was starting to voice, that I was having these certain thoughts and feelings, feeling isolated, dealing with depression, which can manifest to so many people in so many ways, and not having a social structure or really anybody to lean on to. Anytime I leaned onto it with my family, I was met with, well, just go out drinking with your friends and forget about it. I'll just smoke a bowl of weed and, take a Vicodin and just go play some video games. This was during the time when weed wasn't legal either, yeah, this was around early 2000s, maybe 2002 to about 2006, 2007. And then I had to deal with some more issues because my high school sweetheart at the time, we were together for 4 years. I had a very troubling breakup with her. She had cheated on me at the beginning of our relationship, which devastated me. I stayed together with her for another 3 years or so after that. And then she ended up leaving me for another guy. And it was pretty much over after that. Like, we had constant communication. We were with each other constantly. And then all of a sudden that just stopped immediately. So that really, really put me down the spiral of, self-medicating with alcohol.
And so you said at the beginning of this, you were always happy to everybody else. And we know that teens, especially boys, will put on those masks and they will pretend like everything is okay when they're out with their friends or they're out at school. So how did you handle being those two separate people that you were actually living at that time? Besides, you're saying the drinking, was there anything else that came into that?
I was always a very social butterfly. So when I was with my friends, I actually was happy. And when I was out around people, that was about one of the only times I was experiencing a lot of joy and comfort, being with my friends, because friends and family were one of the most important things to me. And, my close friends were supportive with my breakup with Megan, but it was just such a tragic, abrupt ending. There's not really a whole lot that they could do. And I think a lot of them also use, substances such as drinking and smoking weed as a coping mechanism as well. So that was kind of their answer to things like, oh, let's talk about it and, get high. But I never really liked getting stoned back then. I had too much anxiety. When I would get stoned, I'd have a lot of paranoia, but drinking was always my vice. It was always my go-to. Go-to chemical, substance, whatever you want to call it. So.
So then, while this was going on, this is high school you're talking about, and the breakup happened, like junior, senior year.
The breakup actually happened right before my 22nd birthday.
Oh, wow.
We were together in high school. The relationship maintained till my early 20s, and then that's when everything,
All right. And then you had talked about a time when you joined the service and you went away for boot camp.
Yes. Okay. So that actually took me a few years to obtain. It was I started trying to get in 2009. The economy wasn't doing well. The recession had hit. I was stuck at a dead-end job that I didn't like. Living with my parents, working night shift, and my family dynamics were not healthy for me to be around. But I just kept moving forward and trying to get into the service. I was on a waiting list for, I want to say, almost 2 years.
Wow.
And since I dropped out of high school and got my GED, at that time they weren't taking any GEDs. However, they would take a GED if you got a ASVAB score of 55 or higher, something like that. And I was just right under the limit of where my ASVAB score was. So I started taking some night classes for my math, to elevate my math skills, because that was one of the worst subjects that I was lagging, being away from math and dropping out of high school when I was about 15, 16 years old. During that time, I had a friend that was in the National Guard. He told me, he's like, hey, we're doing waivers right now for National Guardsmen. Would you like to transfer over to the Guard? Like, and at the time, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do the Guard. I wanted to go active duty. I wanted to get out of my hometown, get out of my parents' house. But since it was the only option available to me, that's when I finally got in. September 2011, I shipped out for basic training. I came back in March of 2012. I was unemployed, living with my parents again, along with my brother. My brother and I both had like the downstairs. He had one room, I had the other room. He was unemployed. He actually still doesn't work. He hasn't had a job since the end of 2009. So that was a very unique situation, because you would probably understand the terminology for it. So whenever me and my brother would get mad at me, he would stop talking to me. We lived in shared the same living spaces, wouldn't acknowledge me. And this would go on for months, and he would triangulate the information to my parents, like, tell Justin this, tell, Justin that. And also with that, any interaction that we did have together was hostile, violent. He was threatening, he was menacing. Couldn't talk to him. So
I'm sorry.
That's kind of what led to that incident that I shared on stage at the Ultimate Speaker competition. There was so much buildup to that moment. I mean, it was years of buildup, but there was months leading up to that one single point where I blew up and ultimately beat him up so bad I got arrested, charged with assault for domestic violence, and ended up in a 2.5-year court battle that was threatening my military career and also grounding me in Oregon. And I wasn't able to move. I wasn't able to go active duty. I wasn't able to move away until that court mess was taken care of. So I felt really stuck in that time of my life, very, very stuck. And during that time, I had the no contact order with my older brother because of the fight. So after I got arrested, I was homeless, bouncing around from friend's house to friend's house, couch surfing. And then ultimately I stayed with my friend's mom for a few months until I was able to save some money. While I was going through that court case, though, the district attorney was going after everything, trying to get me to pay my brother's medical bills, trying to take my job away because I was a bartender. Somehow she thought they were intertwined or whatnot, even though I didn't have a drug or alcohol charge on me. So during that time, too, while I was going through that court case, I want to say almost 14 months after my arrest, the court case took like just over 2 years. My mom got diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. And my brother was living with my mom. So I wasn't able to go to the house to be with her. And my brother didn't want to lift the no contact order. He said it was because, my parents ultimately said it later because he was afraid of me, but I think it was because he was mad. The DA was actually working with me and trying to get the no contact order lifted so I could be there for my mother's cancer treatment. So I wasn't able to be there for my mom's cancer treatments. And at the time, I was driving past their house every single day on my way to and from work. I would drive past the house. I was really isolated from my family. I've always kind of been the scapegoat. That's still going on today. My father's actually staying with me right now, and he still brings up the past and everything that I've done and blames me for absolutely everything. And I always try to say, yes, I wasn't the perfect child. I did have issues. I never did everything perfect. I tried to own up to, my drinking habits and problems, but everything that was taught to me too was also a learned behavior. I found that out after we went through the, backtrack a little bit. After about 2 years, I asked my attorney, my public defender, if the DA would bring the deferred sentencing back on the table, because that was initially offered to me at the beginning, saying if I pled guilty, did 9 months of domestic violence courses, they would wipe the slate clean. Well, my attorney said that I had a very, very, very strong case and I should pursue it. But after years and years of ongoing court case, I just wanted to gain control of my life. So I asked the attorney if he would bring that offer back up on the table, which they did. So it was around November of 2023, I entered the domestic violence program up in Oregon. And that was such an eye-opener. That course was incredibly hard to go through, but what it taught me was the dynamics of my mom, dad, brother, what I was going through, what I went through over the years. Very eye-opening in the fact that I was allowed to have a voice. I learned how to, put up boundaries with intimate relationships and personal relationships. I realized I was allowed to voice, myself assertively and stand my ground. There was a lot of good information that I learned from those DV classes. Also at the time, because of my arrest, I wanted to be able to handle myself better in a self-defense situation. So I started taking a class called Tactical Intervention Control De-Escalation, which was geared for bartenders and bouncers. It was like the DPSD certification that they do for security guards. I did it through a local MMA gym, and we were doing a lot of jujitsu. And those jujitsu classes that I was doing and the acting out the situation gave me a different perspective on violent situations and was allowing me to be able to handle myself better whenever I got into a fight or flight situation. While also on top of that, I was doing EMDR therapy, which was tremendously helpful because I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after my arrest. After my arrest, I had to see a counselor, or I was already seeing a counselor, and they diagnosed me with PTSD once they found out that I had night terrors and had been dealing with night terrors for so long. The counselor actually recognized it before, but I wasn't talking about the abuse because I felt it was normal to me. I thought there was, what are you talking about? Brothers fight, families fight, but not to the extent or level with the psychological, physical, mental, spiritual, and financial abuse I was dealing with. So I told her about my night terrors after that. She diagnosed me with PTSD. I started doing the EMDR therapy. So like that trifecta of EMDR therapy, having a support group at a MMA gym, doing the DPSST, Tactical Intervention Control De-Escalation classes, along with the DV classes, really kind of molded me and shaped me to understand exactly what it was that I was going through. And I would say that's where I really matured, and grew up and started learning how to handle my problems in a more positive way. Finally had coping skills and tools to use outside of drinking. And that would probably be about the only times where I was bitter, not so smiley, not so happy, not so bubbly, except with my close friends, dealing with a very deep, dark depression, facing a lot of demons all at once, trying to overcome them.
Okay. So when you were going through the EMDR process, what was a typical EMDR appointment like for you? Was it the one with the light bar or with the thumpers, or what was the format for your appointments?
So I put some headphones on and it would beep in one ear, and I held these little electrodes or whatever handles. They lit up and they vibrated.
Okay.
So we would reenact a traumatic event, something that I went through that as I would talk about it, I'd feel my heart racing and get like
Mhm.
fidgety. And I would relive that whole experience while holding the electrodes
Mhm.
and process it. What we did was we took the traumatic event and then processed it through multiple sessions.
Mhm.
Once it started getting down to where it wasn't so traumatic to relive,
Right.
we would then pair it with a positive framework, emotion, thought, feeling, and
Mhm.
experience, and work towards it being less traumatic to more positive.
Mhm.
Certain incidents would take 4 or 5 sessions. Some I would do within one session. One
Mhm.
of the really cool things about the EMDR therapy when I first started was that night I would have a dream
Mhm.
about my session. And when I would wake up in the morning, it was very, very, very hard for me to distinguish which was the dream and which was the session. Because I
Okay.
was tapping into my subconscious mind and really diving down deep into it. And I remember I just wake up and I was like, God, I don't know which one was which.
So I love EMDR for trauma because it helps integrate the left and the right hemispheres. And when we're working with clients in neurofeedback with trauma, we always recommend EMDR because if you can do the two of them together, I always call it therapy on crack because you can go through therapy so quickly with the integration of the two because you do the EMDR and then you do the neurofeedback and we're forcing the brain through that healing process and it helps it happen so quickly for people. But either one of them together is very, very powerful for that.
Yeah, and it does a lot more for you than just talking. Talking can
Oh yeah.
only do so much,
Mm-hmm.
which EMDR, I didn't take meditation up right away. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I ended my EMDR therapy probably around 2014 before I moved to Vegas. And then I met my wife in 2016. She started barking at me, being like, hey, you should really start meditating. I
Mm-hmm.
can, you're a gifted person. You're so powerful. Don't you realize you can create anything? And she really helped wake me up, shake me into place, smack me a few times. But I didn't start meditating until 2021. So she was telling me to do it for 5 years. She was giving me Dr. Joe Dispenza's books. I
Mm-hmm.
read a couple of them. She had me watch his content online.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until 2021 during the COVID era where I really felt stuck and I couldn't escape COVID because my whole life was just submerged in COVID. I was a bartender on the strip in Las Vegas, so naturally they shut down. I was out of work for a year. I exhausted my savings. I, sold my motorcycle. I quit skydiving. I sold my parachute. I started
Oh
tapping
no.
into
Mm-hmm.
investments. Then I got put on the COVID after, during that time I was asking the guard, hey, I'm out of work. You say you're going to need people to go on state active duty orders. I
Mm-hmm.
volunteer. I want to go. And month after month after month, they're like, how are you doing financially? Not good. Oh, we'll get you on orders soon. Next month, going to drill, same thing. So finally, they put me on orders in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just, my wife was paying the mortgage. I was tapped out at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very troubling at that because I was working in the vaccination sites and, I don't like to get too political and, swing to each side of things. But,
Mm-hmm.
I was working in an environment that I didn't agree with per se.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't comfortable in that environment. So it was very troubling for me. And the only way that I was doing like 12 or 14 hours a day in the Nevada in the vaccination site. I was working in the largest vaccination site in Nevada. So the only way that I could escape the reality that I was living in was, to go inward. Plus, I had so much uncertainty and fear of the future. I didn't know if I was going to be forced to get vaccinated to, go to work with the
Mm-hmm.
military. I'd put in for a religious exemption. I was trying to support everybody's, freedom of choice and stuff like that, and be a light in a so-called dark place. But so during that time, it was the only way I could escape it was to go inward, and that's when I started meditating. But once I started meditating, I saw the similarities that EMDR brought to me. So I just instantly fell in love with it. And since then, I could tell you, it took me about a good year before I actively started meditating about an hour a day. But now, since I broke my wrist in August of 2022, I actively meditate an hour every morning. I very rarely go a day or two without meditation. If I got something really troubling or hard to process, sometimes I'll meditate for 2 hours in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. Me and my wife gone to a couple of Dr. Joe Dispenza's retreats. We went to the week-long retreat in Marco Island in 2023, advanced follow-up retreat a year ago in 2024, and we plan on going to another event. And I'm actively writing a book about curiosity to creation, with a lot of talk about meditation and how it's impacted and changed my life.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
About my book, about curiosity or meditation?
Both. Yeah.
Well, for me, that they're very tightly entwined, because I realized, I have always acted on my curiosity, and my curiosity is my passion. If I'm curious about something, I will move heaven and earth to explore it. I will get hyper-focused, put all my time, attention, and money into it. I will, work longer hours. About 9 months ago, I got laid off from my bartending job on the Strip, and I was actually happy to get laid off. I was, feeling like I was getting burnt out with bartending. I wanted a new path, but I sat there for months, trying to ask myself, God, Justin, you don't have any passion. You used to be so passionate about skydiving, motorcycles, bartending. You used to love to go to work. You had a bad day. You went to work. You came home happy. And I really didn't feel that spark or that passion that I felt for anything. And I kept looking for my passion. I'm like, where's my passion? I don't feel it. I can't find it anywhere. And then I took a trip to Thailand because I was just, I still train mixed martial arts, and I was training Muay Thai at the time in a gym here in Vegas, and they were always talking about Phuket. And I was just so curious to go there. I wanted to know the culture, the food, how they train over there. Just got out of the military too, so I was always, American soldier, born and raised American, all I knew was America, American soldier. So I really wanted to expand my culture. And that trip, my wife didn't go with me because I went literally last minute. We'd been talking about taking the trip, but we were going to do it in December, January, and I got laid off, and I had the time and money. So I was like, I'm going to go now. So I booked the trip 5 or 6 days out and went to Thailand by myself. So I had a lot of time to think and reflect. And that's when I realized, I'm like, holy crap, curiosity is my passion. Whenever I'm curious about something, that is my passion. And yeah, it was just one of those little things. It was such a little moment, but such a huge eye opener for me. And then I started just sitting down and writing chapters in my book about curiosity and how it's significantly played a role in my life and helped me regain, I call it curiosity is your compass to creation. When you're lost, it's the guiding principle to whatever you might be working towards. It's also gonna, reprogram old beliefs. It's gonna take you out of a pre-programmed belief system idea and help you think outside the box just by being curious, help you connect to a childlike state where you don't have any insistence on an outcome because, you're just curious. You're just exploring a topic. You're going to, if you wanted to go be a real estate agent and get your real estate license, somebody would go into that with so many expectations. Oh, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. But if you just go into it with no insistence on the outcome, just curious to see where it would go and remain in that childlike state like you do when you're a kid and you're playing Barbies or Army or whatever it is, you're just playing with friends. You're in the present moment. You don't really have an idea or an expectation of how the game's going to go. So that's what I realized curiosity does for me. And then also it gives you a permission slip. We're always looking for validation from outside sources. We always need or want somebody to tell us, okay, it's okay for you to do this. But then you get conflicted with, other people's belief systems, other people's pre-programmed ideas. They might have the best intentions for you, but they might put something in your mind that talks you down. So with the curiosity mindset, it helps you step into your power. You give yourself the permission slip to act on whatever you want. Once you give yourself the permission slip to act on that, it creates all kinds of possibilities and opportunities. Remain in that childlike state, with no insistence on any outcome. And then it gives you the decision whether you want to keep moving forward on the idea, maybe get branched off into a different idea, or if you don't like doing what you're doing and you're honest with yourself, it gives you the permission slip to be like, I've been doing this for 3 to 6 months. I put a lot of time and money into it. I'm not happy doing this, so I'm giving myself the permission to walk away from it. And then you find the next thing you're curious about, rinse, repeat, and keep going.
So what are some things that you have been able to explore over the last few years with your curiosity?
2 things. One of them with meditation. I keep challenging and pushing myself with meditation. Okay. One of the main things that I really challenged myself with was I was diagnosed with severe cervical radiculopathy in my neck. My C5 and 6 were compressed. I had a pinched nerve going down. My tricep muscle atrophied. I was in a lot of pain. And it was scary. Doctors were telling me that I was going to live like that the rest of my life. And I was like, if I live like this the rest of my life, this is no way to live. But I had met so many people along the way that have cured themselves of autoimmune diseases, osteoarthritis, all through the power of meditation. So that seed got planted. I'm like, well, if they can do it, maybe so can I. If it works for them, there's a potential that it might work for me. So I started doing a walking meditation every morning with a 10-minute journal. Beforehand, I would video journal myself, expressing my fears about if it was going to work for me. There's a couple of videos where I broke down crying, and then I would do the meditation and try to embody what it would be like and my goal, my image of myself and my future self was me training Muay Thai in Thailand. And, this was the end of 2023 before I even took my trip to Thailand. So that was what I was envisioning, being healthy, well enough to be able to go there and train Thailand or train Muay Thai, because one of the things you do in Muay Thai is a clinch. You grab each other by the back of the neck and you wrench each other around and throw elbows. And I couldn't do the clinch work. Whenever I was in class, I had to step out. So I just started embodying that on my walking meditations and really embracing what that would be like. And I had some very magical meditations where I'd just get goosebumps. The hair would stand up all over on the back of my neck. I was doing a mile loop around this lake here in Vegas. And what was really powerful was whenever I would get into a high vibrational state and really connect to that energy and just be so full of life and love and charge, the ducks would follow me around the pond. I would walk ahead, they would follow me, fly around, land, I'd walk, they'd follow me. They were following my electromagnetic frequency, and I thought that was so cool. But along that journey, I realized that I was still, like in 2021, holding on to a lot of fear of the future, fear of self-control. And once I let go of that fear and started just embodying a new possibility, that's when my neck started getting better. I didn't hurt as much. Flare-ups weren't as much. And then something would happen and, financially or whatever it may be, or something at work, and I'd get that fear response, and then my neck would start acting up again. So I realized, I'm like, well, maybe this might be, a pre-programmed idea or something that I'm holding on to. I'm making myself sick. So my neck pain now is kind of almost like measurement of how much fear I'm holding on to. Like my neck will start hurting, and then I'll
Yes.
self-evaluate myself, and I'll be like, well, what's really bothering me? And then I do some digging and reflecting.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting how our body and our cells hold on to not only trauma, but like every emotion that, and how it presents it as pain or numbness and tingling, things like that. We know that people that have trauma that don't deal with it actually can develop things like autoimmune disorders and even cancers. We see that the numbers in those populations are much higher. And it's very likely that it's because they haven't addressed the underlying trauma that they're living with.
I've been teasing my wife over the years. I told her that, she's just a pain in the neck and she's the cause.
I'm sure she loves that.
Yeah. You met Linda, that's completely not true. She's the sweetest woman ever. I don't know what the hell she's doing with me. But to answer your other question, another thing that I've done with, stepping out of my comfort zone or utilizing curiosity is my financial situation.
Mm-hmm.
I have utilized curiosity in a way to start investing, learn about real estate, learn about investing, and used it as, well, I'm really curious about learning this. Well, I have no idea which way to go. I have no idea where to get started. So I'd sit there and ask myself the question, well, what can I do to act today? I think of it as like progression, not perfection. I'm not going to become a millionaire overnight. Maybe that's a pre-programmed belief system I have in my head that I need to work on. But, I what can I do today to change that? Well, I'm really curious about this book or this seminar or, meeting up with coffee and talking to that one guy I met at the gym. So I would just act on that and just get curious about it, give myself the permission slip to move forward. And then once I move forward, I realize this opens myself up to possibilities and opportunities. Then, I decide from there. It's like, well, what am I curious about now? What am I curious about now? And, before when I first started, it felt like I was just all over the place and I wasn't gaining any traction in any direction. But what I realized is, it taught me financial education as a whole to, progress and, over time and over the years. And, my financial situation has gotten better and better. And, it's better to the point was if I lost my job, like I did, I wasn't worried about how I was going to pay my mortgage. I had savings, investments, and passive income coming into where it was like, oh, sweet, I got the money. Let's go to Thailand.
Always nice.
Yeah, which creates a lot of, financial freedom and stuff. And it was a reward to myself because I do believe that that's important. You can't just, sacrifice and invest and constantly, you have to live your life. You have to enjoy yourself, so you have to treat yourself on the occasions.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So was there along your path, it sounds like there were a lot of moments. Was there one moment that you feel like was the one that helped you the most in being able to make that shift to having the healing from the trauma that you had lived with?
The healing from the neck or just the healing from my brother or?
From the brother situation, like all of this when you were a child.
So that is a very amazing, yes. It's not what you would think.
Okay.
So my breaking point self-realization moment was I was still living in Oregon and I was building my life down here in Vegas. At the time, I was dating a nurse that lived down here in Vegas, and I came down here to visit her. That was when my mom had the stage 1 breast cancer. I was going through the domestic violence classes. I was still, on court-ordered issues, stuck in my hometown. But I had this relationship going on with this nurse, Emily, and I came down here to visit her. She ended up breaking up with me through text message. while I was down here and ended up ghosting me. Well, I got up to my hotel room, which I think I told you, I live in the hills in Las Vegas in Henderson, and we overlook the valley, and I can see the hotel and casino that I stayed in from my backyard. But I was in there in some junior suite on the 17th floor, and I finally just let everything out. I mean, I just thrashed that hotel. I ended up breaking my hand in multiple places. I broke my third and fourth metacarpal this way. I lacerated all my knuckles. I had like over 21 stitches in my hand. Once my hand was broken, I picked up one of the legs from the dresser and used it as a baseball bat on walls, TVs, everything. And I just screamed the most intense, violent scream that you could, just let everything out at the final moment, just and after I did that, it was just like, oh, thank God. It was like, now I know why they have those stress rooms where people go in and break stuff. And it did. It cost me like $4,000 in damages. In the hotel, I went downstairs. I told security what happened and everything that I was going through. They were really friendly. They just wanted payment of the room. They drove me to the hospital. I wasn't in trouble. But that defining moment was so powerful. I still say it was the best thing I ever did, because I had a good support system of friends and they were trying to help me, but I was just dealing with so much. I had so much anger, so much resentment, so much burden that I was just carrying. And, I was almost had this image of, being, I'm a United States soldier. I'm supposed to conduct myself. I'm not supposed to feel this. I'm not supposed to act this way. And that was the moment where I just let it all go. And I just let myself be human. I allowed myself to just be human. And I just had such a connection with God in that moment, with source energy. I just had this overwhelming sense of knowing, like, the answer isn't outside of you. The answer is within you. You know what you want. You need to stop listening to yourself. You need to step into your power. You need to give yourself that permission slip, and you need to take charge of your life and do what you want, not what other people want. And I really think that really was the defining moment where I realized, like, I am powerful and I'm in control of my life. But it just took me about $4,000 in a hotel room to do, figure it out.
Okay, well, we all get there, and sometimes the path that we take doesn't sound like the traditional path, but as long as you've gotten there, that's what matters.
I think you could do that with most anything. Like, nothing is by accident. Everything has a valuable lesson if you put a positive light on it. If you look at it from a curious perspective, you will see the benefit of every bad situation that you've gone through. I mean, even everything I went through with my past, with my family dynamics, if anything, it's taught me exactly what I don't want to experience. I know that for a fact. But,
well, even from like a religious perspective, one door closes and another one opens. You can take that and put that and twist that into this situation as well. The path doesn't always seem to make sense. They say that you plan your path like this, but your path ends up going like this and then turning back on itself. And then I remember seeing that as a meme once, and I was like, yeah, that feels right. That's just how life goes. So
that was funny too, because I showed up for drill that following weekend and I had, bandaged up, this and that. And I'm like, hand him a, prescription pad, being like, hey, I just had surgery on my hand, so if I piss hot for opioids, this is why. Like, if you do a random UA on me. And at that moment, that's when, like, everybody started listening to me, being like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, what's going on with you? And I had been crying and calling out for help, and everybody was like very attentive at that moment. But I showed up and I was like, no, I'm fine. Like, don't worry, I took care of it. Like, everything's good. Like, I'm focused now. I know exactly what I want to do, what I want. And it's kind of funny to go, I was still a lower enlisted soldier at that time. So, the demeanor and how they treat you in the Army should have been, they were very loving and kind at that moment, rather than hazing me and picking on me.
Well, I am so glad that we had the opportunity to talk to you, and I am glad that I had the opportunity to meet you and get to see, all of your positive energy and how you have taken your past and turned it into something positive for the future. And definitely we will be staying in touch. I will share all of your contact information if anybody would like to follow you and watch out for your upcoming book. Do you have an expected release date?
We're shooting around September. I haven't came up with the definitive date yet, but I'm thinking like maybe it was like September 7th or 8th was the date we were shooting on. We were trying to get it to publish like midweek, and I can't remember the exact date. But also, with that being said, I just want everybody to know I am not condoning going and thrashing a hotel room to help cure your problems. Please do not do it. Go to one of those break rooms. We have them here in Vegas. Hit me up. I'll meet you there. We'll break some plates, but please don't go thrash a hotel room like a rock star.
No, that's not recommended. But again, everybody's journey is unique and individual. So, we want to support you in the journey that you had and praise you for having taken those steps and to be feeling better now.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. And remember to like, share, and follow.
Woohoo!